my mother did say something really great. She said, if you have one good friend, you're doing great.
Oh.
And that was really helpful. And also, if you're never alone if you have a book.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Both of those are great.
Yeah, but she also said when I wanted to be a comedian, she said, you don't make us laugh. Why don't you start by making us laugh, she said. So, yeah, she had her good and bad. Yeah.
So you're doing a show in January.
Yes.
Off-Broadway, New York City.
Off-Broadway, Lucille Lortel.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's a good one, yeah.
Oh, really
I've seen
beautiful.
some great shows there.
Yes.
And, yeah, and it's called Grandiloquent.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you.
The two words, grand and eloquent?
No. This is the key. It's grandiloquent means using extravagant or showy language. And here's my favorite
That's a
part.
single word?
Especially when intended to impress.
Oh, wow.
Gary.
Oh, I love that.
It actually has my name in the definition.
Gary. Comma Gary?
Yeah.
Period?
Comma Gary, period.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Grandiloquent.
Yeah.
So can you, without giving away the show, can you describe the show to the listeners?
It's part memoir in that I talk a lot about my life from first grade or an event in first grade that I feel either it definitely changed my personality at the time and informs who I am now.
Yeah.
Which is I repeated the first grade, and a lot of what I became soon thereafter and what I am now is based on that idea that the child is the father of the man. That really resonates with me, and so gave rise to a lot of the subjects I cover in the show and about fathers and sons. And also my wife and I have frozen some embryos. And wow. I was watching the new one, and you really captured that whole thing of having to go into a fertility clinic and humiliate yourself.
It's so humiliating.
It's humiliating, and everybody knows what you did. And Eugene Merman did a great joke that night when we were in Cambridge. Remember?
Cambridge, yeah.
And he said that somebody, when he went in to do the fertility thing, somebody said, "We love Bob's Burgers."
Oh my God, we love Bob's Burgers.
You're supposed to be anonymous, and they just that's a HIPAA violation right there.
Yeah,
so
everything about it.
Yeah,
is embarrassing.
Yeah, so a lot of it was considering. For a long time, I didn't want to have kids like you, but the main reason I didn't want to have kids was that my childhood was such a nightmare that I didn't want to foist that on someone. And so, but once I got healthy, I thought, no, life is a pretty good run. It's a good ride.
It's a good ride.
Yeah, and to deny a being this might not be as responsible as you think.
That's really interesting.
And so if somebody could have a life similar to mine, or at least the amount of joy that I'm able to experience in my mid 40s through now I'm 54, I think I'm very positive about the prospects for a Gulman child.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Last time that you were on the podcast, we talked about our friendship, and we're going to move towards having less of a work friendship to a real friendship. Are we getting there?
Well, we need to do something together. We need to meet for dinner or lunch or a double date or something like that. And then we'll be in that place. But that I don't know if I told you when I said this the last time, but I had this friend when I was in high school, and he said a friend is someone you do stuff with. Like, that was his definition.
I love that.
Yeah. A friend is someone you do stuff with. And then I had this other friend, Sean, who said, a friend, if you're my friend, he said, and you're stuck in Australia, I will make every effort to come save you.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And that was really, and he was like 18 years old. But that was like a solid friend. But those were the types of friends you make when you, and I explained it in the show. I didn't have a friend until 5th grade. And so I had high ideals for friends, but also attracted loyal friends, because it doesn't take much to hurt my feelings and make me withdraw. And
right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It's sad.
No, it's okay.
Really?
I don't think it's sad, but I think it's certainly, I think the reason I'm pausing is that it's an obsession of mine. Like adult friendship is an obsession of mine because it's like, it doesn't have the construct of school.
No.
School provides a little bit of a framework for
Totally.
Maybe these should be your friends.
Yes.
Maybe find some people in this scrum.
Yes.
And then you get into the grown-up world and it's like, you figure it out.
Yes. I mean, making friends after 40, it's really tough because we're so set and we have our own friends and our usually our partners, and so it's difficult to fit them in. But I've been pretty good about making some good friends after 40, and it's easier when you're a comedian too because you have more free time than most people
I
do,
think
and
true.
you're intersecting with newer people from time to time when you work on new projects and things. So it's pretty cool. And also the diversity of the types of people that we intersect with. It's like sports or music. We're really lucky.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your show is now on sale for January.
Yes.
Seeing you live, because I saw you live recently, is such an absolute treat. And as people make fun of me in the comments section, my highest recommendation is I couldn't recommend this more highly. Seeing you live is just such a joy.
Oh, thanks,
One
man.
of the things that you do that I've never seen anyone do is sometimes you'll say to the audience, "I'm at the top of my game," which I think is hilarious.
But it's not a lie. I'm really doing good work, and I'm not comparing. This is the great thing that you learn as you get older. Don't compare yourself to the other comedians.
That's right.
Because they're all better than you. But compare yourself to, in your head, you can make them all better than you. But compare yourself to yourself a year or two ago, or when you were working at your best creative level, and it's and that's a fair thing to say.
I think you're right. Here's my observation. Today I was watching your older clips from like one of your specials in 2002 and then your recent clips. Well, here's my observation.
A different comedian.
Yeah, it's a different
right?
comedian. I think your early work, you are presenting as cool.
Totally.
Right? Like you're a cool guy.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I mean you're judgmental of people around you without really acknowledging the absurdity of yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the challenges of your own.
Yeah.
And then as you've aged, I feel like you've leaned into uncool. But
Sure.
actually, by being uncool, you've reached the nirvana of cool.
Exactly. I think I was
not the capital N, but the lowercase n nirvana.
I think I was influenced a lot by the speed of Boston comedy that you tell your
Early
jokes.
on.
Yeah, and the need for a male Boston comedian to be the coolest guy in the room.
Sure.
And that's helpful in some ways and not helpful in artistic ways a lot of the times.
Yeah, to give context to people who don't know Boston comedy,
right.
It's brash.
Yeah.
It's loud.
It's loud,
very
it's fast.
Male. Or
Yeah.
at least when you and I came up in the 90s and early 2000s. And the 80s, certainly. I mean, in the 80s, there's this unbelievably good documentary called When Stand Up Stood Out that documents the Boston comedy scene in the 1980s. It is nothing like I've ever seen anything. These people were so out of their minds. They're on cocaine. Yeah. They were making tons of money and blowing it on
tons
things.
Of cash.
Yeah, tons of cash.
Yes.
And the comedians, some of them were great.
Yeah.
A lot of them weren't great, but they were just loud and like doing it.
Yeah.
And it was. It's fascinating.
It's and yet Stephen Wright came out of that.
Yeah. There's some great comics that came out of it. But then, and I want to say it's Salomone is the name of the documentarian.
Fran Salomone, yeah.
Yeah. And I've mentioned it before on the show because
it's riveting.
Mulaney and I used to on tour when we first saw that documentary, we used to quote it all the time because there's this great line in it where they're talking about when Stephen Wright got the Tonight Show, which basically meant he made it in the 1980s.
Yes.
And somebody said to him, "It's not your turn."
Wow.
It was either him or Bobcat Goldthwait. It was one of those two where someone really made it big, and they were like, "It's not your turn," which is very Boston in
Totally
the sense that
Boston.
it's the accent of "not your turn."
Yeah.
And then it's also just kind of like this hierarchy.
Yeah.
That's sort of fictional.
Yeah. And also this fake fairness.
As though anything's fair.
Yeah, as anything's fair. Maybe sports is a complete meritocracy, and so you can't imagine somebody saying to LeBron James at 18, "You're not out of college. You gotta go to college first.
You gotta go to college first.
Yeah, at least go for 1 year.
You gotta go to Boston College."
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just it's nuts, but you get it, because part of the thing, and this comes back to friendship, about having a friend make it, is you're happy for them, but then there's also a sadness, because I always think, I'm like Brian Koppelman, we used to spend every Sunday together, and then Billions took off, and we hardly saw each other for years when he was making that show, because he was so busy.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of sadness. I miss my friend.
Yeah.
I miss my friend. It's like Shawshank Redemption, when the guy gets out of prison.
Yeah.
He's like, I also miss him though.
So how do you feel about sitting your show in New York? I mean, you and I were talking about how, what's funny is I think it was in your last special, you make fun of people who do one-person shows, and you're like, every one-person show could be called
Mommy Look.
Mommy Look.
Yes. Yeah, that was an alternative show name to the show. Yes. But I mean, I've always admired the form, been intimidated by it, and loved the challenge of it, but have tried. I think Born on Third Base, initially I wanted to make it a one-person show. I would have loved to have had the energy and also the chops to make The Great Depression to a one-man show. And so this time I wanted to do it. But yes, I said that just about every one-person show could be called Mommy Look. But I also feel that every stand-up show that I've given over the past 30 years, the subtext is Mommy Look. Yeah. It's an audition, an audience of one in some ways.
It's certainly where I started, is Mommy Look. That's how I started performing. I think, at the very least.
Yeah.
Do you feel like at this stage in your life, is it like a modified Mommy Look? Like it's still Mommy Look, but you've aged with it.
Maybe, but there's still a track in my head that is commenting on the show. Sometimes during the show, sometimes just after the show when I consider it. And it's a combination of my mom and some other people in my life, brothers and people just saying, "Yeah, you're being indulgent, and this is not what they paid for."
Right.
And also I remember one night just not being very, very entertaining at the Cellar, and getting a phone call about my lack of entertaining
really?
at the Cellar, and I
from the higher powers
at the Cellar, and I remember thinking, well, this is a moment. This is an interesting inflection point.
You're describing my greatest fear in my life, basically the thing that haunts my dreams.
Seriously?
Oh yeah. I think about it all the time. I feel like my fear is exactly what you're describing. Getting a phone call and saying, "Hey, we're concerned that this is not entertaining enough."
Yeah, I mean, and I was very careful about what parts of the Great Depression I shared at the Cellar, because some of it is a bummer, and some of it is not all that funny, and some of it was not worked out entirely, and we've probably talked about this before, but David Tell, I remember, and I heard this third or fourth hand, so who knows what he said originally, but he said, you need a place where you can kill and a place where you can bomb.
Yeah.
And that's really important, and finding those places. And you don't have to bomb in the place.
That's a beautiful line, by the way.
You don't have to bomb in the places that you can bomb. You just have to go with that feeling.
Yes.
And for me, for a while, it was the Comedy Studio.
Yeah,
and I would bomb in Cambridge, the original Comedy Studio above the Hong Kong, and now I feel like it's QED and Union Hall but I was dying to talk about this with you, because you've experienced this, where how much different doing comedy for an audience that is there to see a comedy show versus an audience there to see a Mike Birbiglia show.
Very different.
It is not, for me, it is so much the reason why I feel like I'm doing my best work is that I can trust an audience to be patient with me and have the context of what I do and what I'm about before I get on stage. And I'm a little bit spoiled, but also part of me says, well, why should I try to do jokes that everyone will love a little bit instead of trying to write jokes that the people who get it will think they were written especially for them.
But that's why I do both.
Yeah.
Because I think we're discussing that your joke that every one person show could be called Mommy Look. And it's like, for me, my journey is that's definitely how I got into stand-up.
Yeah.
I think somewhere in my 20s or 30s, I started to have a connection with audiences where I'm like, oh my God, this is like a deep personal connection.
Yes.
And I've never experienced anything like this before. And so now I'm chasing
on stage or off stage?
On stage.
But I found that I didn't have that connection a lot off stage, where I could be myself 100% the way
just in your life,
or closer.
Oh yeah, I mean,
you're
describing all of our lives,
right? Or or closer to my real self on stage in some ways. But then I've also constructed a persona and prepared every single word I say.
No, well, of course.
Which you can't do in a conversation. They want you to ad lib.
They
humans
These people.
Humans expect in a conversation that you aren't building to something and close on a callback.
And that's why I feel like I'm constantly disappointing fans when
right?
I meet them in real life.
Oh my
because
word.
Everything I say is not as good as what I constructed on stage.
Oh, I get that.
And it makes me actually understand why performers who I've enjoyed over the years try to avoid interaction sometimes with fans because of that. Because I can see the disappointment in fans when they talk to me in real time.
I think you're projecting. I think all they want is for you to be earnest and sincere.
I try.
And you don't necessarily have to be funny, but yeah, we're never as funny after the show as we are
funny as our
during the
perfectly
show.
constructed 60-minute monologue we wrote over the course of 4 years.
Exactly.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, exactly.
I always try to imply to the audience that these are things I've thought of afterwards and not things that I wittily whipped off. Because I think early in my career, I implied that I was so witty moment to moment.
That's a very honest and vulnerable thing to say. I didn't say that right away because the original way most of us start off, or I remember there was this guy, I think his name was Chuck Martin, and he said that he thought when he first started doing comedy that it was just snappy answers, stupid questions from Mad Magazine. And there is a brand of that in comedy. These people who just make a list of all the funny things. In Boston, it was always the witty things they said to police officers arresting them for drunk driving.
Oh my gosh.
And
it's so funny.
It was so gross on so many levels, but would murder at the comedy shows in Boston in the early 90s when I started. Now I think people are like, yeah, you shouldn't drink and drive. But back then it was like, we all do it.
Mulaney and Kroll used to goof around about that they called that comic the Do What I Do comic.
Oh my God.
Oh, you ever in a situation like that? Do what I do. And then it's something they definitely didn't do.
Totally.
And then as an audience, you're supposed to believe that that's what they did. And it's like, no. Do what I do. You take a shit in their top of their couch and then you leave. It's like, no, I don't think that happened.
I love that. On Todd Glass's first Comedy Central Presents, he did this Do What I Do, but they were so absurd. Like at one point he got into a kangaroo costume and took a dump on somebody's lawn. And he said, do what I do. He was making fun of it. Was a satire of the Do What I Do comedians.
Do what I do.
Yes. It's just so crazy.
I was watching your classic bit about state abbreviations.
Oh, okay.
At the beginning of the bit, you say, I watched a documentary about state abbreviations. Then you go into this hilarious bit that's outrageous and extreme and hyperbolic. And then, of course, I look up the documentary. There is no documentary.
Right,
and I'm like, this is the Hassan Minhaj moment of Gary Gulman's
Oh, my
career.
gosh. That's hilarious.
I captured you.
I
trapped you.
That's
You're
hilarious.
lying about the documentary.
That's hilarious. But I've told you this before, but that joke was in my notebook for 20 years.
Yeah.
But until they started making documentaries about little things, there was really no way to tell it, or I didn't know the way to tell it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, it was the conceit of there was this documentary as opposed to this is just this thing I'm thinking about.
Yes. The thing I've been thinking about since third grade, when I got a book and they had all the state abbreviations in it, and I thought it's going to be impossible to memorize these, because I was really into memorizing things for no reason other than I had a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking it's going to be really hard to memorize these because most of these states start with the same first two letters.
Yeah.
And then when you start doing comedy, I don't know if you went through this, where you're spending days all day long thinking, is this funny? Is this funny? Is this funny?
Yeah.
And what about the fact that most of the states start with the same two letters, but then soon thereafter, the premise isn't strong enough to hold the rest of the joke.
There was this great interview with George Saunders, who I know you and I both love.
Yeah, I love him.
Where
Oh,
he's
my word.
talking about how so much of being a writer is reading your own writing and seeing if it still brings you joy.
Yeah.
Or lights you up, and then being honest with yourself about whether it does.
Yeah.
Because so often we're like, oh yeah, this works. And it's like, well, does it?
Yeah.
Are you really holding yourself to the full standard?
Yeah. I had a joke that I've had for months and months, and there are some biblical puns in it. And the main premise is that I feel that the Sermon on the Mount was not improvised, that Jesus workshopped it.
Yeah.
And so I'm touring it for months, and I had two pretty solid puns in there. That one of the clubs that he worked it out at was the Proverb Factory, and then John says, "Is that the one on Melrose?" And Jesus says, "No, that's the Hymprov." and this guy who's a fan, but a lot of fans can be very funny.
Oh yeah, by all means.
Right?
Yeah.
And so he says, what about saying that he went to all the open mounts?
Oh, that's good.
And I thought that was terrific. And I used
gosh.
it in the next show, and it got a laugh. And I was like, oh my gosh, my fans.
The one of my favorite jokes of yours is you go, millennials get criticized by middle-aged men who say, how are they going to learn how to lose? And then you go, oh, they'll get some practice.
Oh.
Are you familiar at all with life? And I love that joke because it's so economical. It's so few words.
Oh, thanks.
Are you familiar with life? And I was curious, like, how'd you arrive at it? And did it take a series of drafts, or did it just come to you?
The first part, here's what was difficult with any time you say anything good about millennials at the average comedy club. I won't say they're bad comedy clubs, but the average comedy club is that they're so conditioned from comedians bashing millennials.
Yeah. And now that joke applies, of course, to Gen Z also.
Yeah.
It's the same joke. Basically.
Yeah, that they think you're being sarcastic. So it was always a fight against that. And I said, no, I mean this. They're kinder on the average and more empathetic than we are, and much less tolerant of bullies and homophobia and things like that. And so that was a hurdle initially, but also in the average comedy club, a lot of the people feel that these kids are getting participation trophies, right, and they're not learning how to lose.
So you probably got some cheering or thinking you're being sarcastic.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So you had to fight through that, but then you'll get some practice. That was always there. And once they'll get some practice. All you have to do is come up with what the practice will be. And then here's the thing. You can go truly specific and say, have you ever interviewed for a job? right? Or anything like that. Not as funny as the broader, which is counterintuitive to what we do in comedy, which is specific.
Right.
Or good comedy, but every once in a while you go really general.
Yeah.
And Norm Macdonald was one of the best at that.
Yeah.
Is at going really, really general or specific. I mean, he was man, like a lot of the things he said were basically just the simple truth, and he wasn't really putting much on it. He would do. He was really great executor of understatement and overstatement.
Yes. So he would say things like, Hitler, we should be worried about that guy.
Yes. But the interesting...
The understatement of all time.
The interesting thing is that we could probably take most of our jokes and say, well, this is that formula.
Oh, no,
this
certainly.
Yeah, this is understatement. But it's the what we're able to do with it at this point in our decades-long careers to make it seem fresh or original. And I always think about how the simple truth is frequently the funniest, and just saying something using the right words is so much of it.
Yeah. You familiar at all with life?
Thanks, man.
It's great. Are you familiar at all with life? Your therapist told you the audience is not your family because these people are rooting for you.
Yes.
Do you have a person in your life who, in hindsight, you could have rooted for more?
Oof. Man. Wow. This is a great question, and I want to give it, and I don't have an answer right off the top of my head, but I think most of my friends growing up until I don't think when I played basketball or I was in school or being around my friends, it wasn't that common that you would compliment a friend or tell them what you thought of them, and I wish I had told my friend, other than laughing at everything he said, my friend Jason Hurwitz, I wish I had told him in explicit words, my gosh, you are so smart and funny and talented and so insightful, and you bring me so much joy, and I feel like I can be myself around you, and I feel like you truly get me and love me and accept me, and I want you to know that I will be that person for you. But we're also insecure and in our heads and afraid of losing friends by being too nice or too, especially men, and especially New England men. We didn't tell. I'm sure I expressed in the way that we were comfortable expressing, and the way that he would get it. But there are boys who do that. Mm-hmm. They usually they're usually just so much more mature and have a better parental system, and don't have a brother saying things about you, saying open things to them, and because it makes them uncomfortable, giving you a hard time. I mean, even in Good Will Hunting, when they are affectionate with each other, there's always a kicker, or if you watch The Sopranos, it's impossible for them to be open and kind with each other. So I wish I had been that guy earlier. And you don't have to be that with everybody, just the people you feel safe with. Yeah. And my mother did say something really great. She said, if you have one good friend, you're doing great. Oh. And that was really helpful. And also, you're never alone if you have a book.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Both of those are great.
Yeah, but she also said, when I wanted to be a comedian, she said, you don't make us laugh. Why don't you stop by making us laugh? She said. So, yeah, she had her good and bad. Yeah.
This is called the slow round. Who are you jealous of? And the second question is, who are you jealous of that you just thought of but didn't say?
Oh, wow. Who am I jealous of? There was a time when there would be a new comedian. When I first saw Dane Cook when I was 22 years old and going to my first open mic, and I saw an open mic, and I was like, this guy is in an open mic, and I didn't know anything about him or his trajectory or anything like that. Sure. I just remember being like, he just made these people go crazy with how funny he was about Speak and Spell and Jurassic Park. Yeah. And he's 18 or 19 years old, and I was like, oh, here's the thing that you have to avoid in early comedy is seeing somebody who makes you want to quit.
Yeah.
Like, I remember I couldn't watch too much Brian Regan because there was always this thing where I was like, why do I even bother?
Yeah.
It's being done better, more physical, and it's a similar. When I watch Chris Fleming now, I'm like, man, is he bringing everything into every joke?
Fearless.
And why is anybody else doing comedy? Because he's got it so locked down, and he's so original and fun and joyous and smart and also the way he moves, I'm envious of.
So
my gosh, he's a trained dancer.
He's a good person to be jealous of.
Totally.
And he's a great dresser, too.
Oh, I love how he dresses. I love how he dresses. And I'm like, yeah, at 54, I can't wear a boa. Even if that was me, I couldn't. Could you imagine going to the Comedy Cellar and wearing a boa at any age?
Can you think of a time that you were so scared you ran away?
Literally ran away?
Yeah, but you could also, it could be figurative.
I talked about this in the book. The literal one was there was this, and he was significantly smaller than me, but he had threatened to beat me up and also made an anti-Semitic remark. And my father had ingrained it in me that somebody makes an anti-Semitic remark, you have to fight them. You cannot not fight them. Oh my
God.
And so I'm walking home, and this kid's taunting me, and he throws in the anti-Semitic remark, and we were right next to a drop off next to the sidewalk that kind of went into it wasn't a ravine in that you could get hurt, but it was a sloping area that you would tumble if you were pushed over it. Mm-hmm. And he was walking beside me, following me home, and then we got to this ravine area, and I hadn't planned it, and I just pushed him, and then I ran.
Oh my God!
I ran for my life.
He tumbled. He tumbled down the
ravine. But it gave me an opportunity to get enough distance that I could get to my house, and if the key was in the mailbox, I would be able to get in.
Wow.
And of course, the key was not in the mailbox, and he caught up to me, and then we had a thing out front of my.
This is straight out of Goonies.
Out of my.
This is Jewish Goonies.
The Fratellis, yeah. Was that their name, the Fratellis?
The name of the family?
Yeah, that they were trying to avoid. Yeah. Oh my gosh, straight out of the Goonies. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, but I really ran from fear, obviously.
I wanted to get to material because I'm working on a story for my show right now that is about how I would play soccer when I was a kid, and the story is really about my dad, because a lot of the show that I'm in the show right now, I'm really trying to round out what was previously kind of a two-dimensional version of my dad. He'd shout, he'd be like, God damn it, where's the watermelon? I'd be like, do we have water? You know, because it wasn't always so dramatic.
But stand-up is always so two-dimensional, and you can't put the third dimension in, which is the fact that we're humans and have contradictions and some good and some bad.
Right.
Because you don't have long enough.
You don't have long enough.
Or you don't have the right context, which the one-man show is the context.
That's
for.
Right.
And so you can and you can have, if you are comfortable with those quiet moments.
Right. So I'm trying to work on dimensionalizing my dad and because I start with a joke about how when I was a kid, my dad was a doctor, and in his free time, he got his law degree. Oh. And I go, that's how much he didn't want to be a dad.
Wow.
And you know, and in fairness, we weren't great kids. You know, we always wanted a dad.
Oh my
And he
word.
wanted another secondary degree. So that's like the joke part of it, right?
So good.
But then the rounding out of it, dimensionalizing of it, I was trying to think like, what is the thing about my dad that was really sweet? And I go like, he wasn't absent. He would show up for soccer games, which I felt like weren't my best showcase.
Oh.
You know?
Yeah.
Because it was like, he didn't show up for the play.
Right.
Which is the thing that I was going pro with.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's really good.
He'd show up for soccer games. And with youth soccer.
And how did you feel when he was there? Did you get nervous? I used to get so nervous and anxious.
Yeah. I always thought about it. And because I was okay at soccer. I will say, like, youth soccer, at least in the 80s, it's very simple. A bunch of middle-aged men chasing children around going, don't use your hands. That's the whole game.
That's so good.
And then if you're terrible at it, you're the goalie. They get like, here's this neon yellow shirt.
It's very funny.
And some gloves, stand in that box. So I was the goalie. And one time, and what I had going for me as the goalie was not my skill set, but my aggression. I was very tenacious, which I still am now in my comedy.
Yeah.
And I remember one time there was a ball rolling towards me in a game. I sprinted towards it, and I made the mistake of diving headfirst towards the ball, which you should not do.
No.
Because I get the ball, I reach the ball, the guy sprinting towards it kicks my head like it is the ball.
Oh, Jesus.
And then I say to the audience, I go, I don't remember the rest of the story, but here's what was told to me by my teammates. Apparently, I hopped right up, and I go, I'm good. Yeah, everyone's worried. I'm good.
Wow.
And then the game continues. Again, I don't remember this part of the story. And then 15 minutes later, I wander off the field between the field and the concession stand, and everyone on my team are like, Mike, are you okay? And I go, what are we even doing here?
No.
Yeah. And then they stopped the game, and I never played soccer goalie again. And then so I go, the reason why I bring it up is that what I remember from that day is that my dad drove me home, and he asked me all the questions a neurologist asks their patient.
Yeah.
And I understood why people thought my dad was a great doctor. I never knew.
Yeah.
I saw this side of him.
Wow.
He's a great bedside manner, and very patient and
that's incredible.
Thoughtful. And
that's such a great anecdote. And it also, he came to see you at your thing, and then you got to see him at his thing.
Yeah.
It's really, you became a patient and a son.
Yeah. And I saw very, and then I bring up this anecdote from recently where I'm
because of HIPAA, you cannot do the bring your son to work day as a doctor.
That's true.
And have your dad operate or do whatever he does with people with his son there.
And people would come up to me when I was a kid, and they would go like, total strangers would go, oh, your dad, Dr. Birbiglia. I go, he's a great doctor. And I go, okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I never saw that side of it. Right?
That's really strong. One thing that I was thinking is so meaningful and an aspect of being a good father, and it doesn't have to be being a great doctor, but one thing that would be great to be as a father is appreciated by the people that they work with. It's a really nice aspect of humanity. And I read Barry Sonnenfeld, right? He's the director of Men in Black, and it's a hilarious memoir, and he just bashes his mom and dad the entire way, and it's funny, and you can't believe the stories are so crazy, but they're true because they're so crazy. And at the end, he's talking about being at his mother's funeral, and all the people that she worked in the school system as a teacher and also an administrator, and all the people who she had affected in their life, and it made me think that, all right, this woman was a horrific mother, but what a great feeling to have somebody speak so well of this mother that you had a different relationship with. I mean, that's one thing. I have a very complicated relationship with my mother, but people love her. Mm-hmm. If you've worked with her, if you've been exposed to her for 2.5 hours at a time, she's witty, she's kind, she's thoughtful, she's generous. But of course, if you live with her, you see every side of her, and there's a lot of painful sides, and there's a lot of sides you both wish that somebody would take back their contribution to it. And I think that story. I mean, will you do it closer to the end of the show? Yeah, it's such a. I mean, that's what I love about your one person shows, is that you get a to-go bag at the end where you kind of sum up the show. And there's a part where it's almost, you don't do this intentionally, but if somebody were to say, well, what's the show about? And then it's a précis of what the show is about, and it's also very, very moving, and there's a kicker, and it's funny, and it's just it's so important, and you build to that, and I mean I'm aspiring to that in what I'm doing now.
Is there material you're working on right now?
Yes. I mean, one of the things I've been working on is this thing about my intellectual insecurity and how it's beneficial to my audience, in that I want to write smart jokes, and so I work really hard on writing smart jokes, but this need to consider myself smart and feel smart, my wife has to experience that the other 22 hours of the day.
Yes.
So she'll say, and I think you might have seen this, she'll say, who sings this? And I hear it, hey, could you give me a 3-hour lecture on the grunge movement and turn this car ride into a hostage crisis, and I'm being held hostage by Kurt Loder of MTV News.
Oh my God.
and so it's a 10-minute routine that I had to memorize and then test out. But the good thing is you make it sound less memorized as it goes along.
Yeah.
But then there's this push-pull where, does this sound too written?
Right.
And it's just it's challenging, because they have to believe that you're thinking of it just now.
Right.
But then there's also an ending where 10 minutes in, Sade says, "Oh, good, we're here." And
so good.
But is it?
Oh, I like the ending.
It felt so,
because I saw you do it live.
Yeah, but doesn't it? Here's the problem with comedians who write really hard. We distrust if it's easy. Like, it didn't take a lot for me to think, yeah, why don't you just say, "Oh, we're here"? So I distrust it, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Where something seems too easy to be good?
No. I okay, if you want me to be super honest about that bit, because I saw you do it in front of an audience, I thought it was great. You basically do, Sade, your wife, asks you, the construct of it is, she asks you who sings a song. You go into a tangent on a tangent on a tangent on a tangent that reveals your own kind of like intellectual insecurity and also knowledge of grunge rock and all these things. And then the way that it resolves is she goes, "Oh, we're here."
Yeah.
And I want to say it runs 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I think you cut it to the funniest 5 minutes so that the audience is distracted by the absurdity of what you're talking about, such that you can quickly circle back to Sade, and then they're like, "Oh, right, we were in the car the whole time."
Oh, I like that.
I think that'll be great.
That's really helpful.
Because here's what I like about the Sade driving in the car bit. I get a sense of a lot of things. I get a sense of location. I get a sense of where you are. I get a sense of your relationship with her.
Yeah.
I get a sense of your backstory in the 90s, what you're interested in music. So like, here's this like 5-minute capsule. And like, I'm getting a lot from you.
Yeah.
Which I think is so crucial in a show like this.
But also you give me an idea that maybe to try and find some areas that that do explain more about our relationship and who she is, and I think that's really, really interesting. But there was one thing that
also, like, it's worth pointing out, because not that many people do these types of solo shows. In my experience, the audience is.
I'm sorry if I seem rude. I'm looking up this quote by Zadie Smith, so forgive me.
In my experience, the audience will be patient with you if you step out of your story and, without jokes, say, here's the dynamic between me and Sade.
Yeah.
Or here's a little quick detail about me and Sade's apartment, etc., whatever it is.
Yeah.
But that kind of thing could have major impact on that 5-minute driving in the car bit too.
Yes. No, totally. Which is something you don't think about if you're just trying to get laughs.
Absolutely. The final thing we do is working it out for our cause. Is there a nonprofit that you like to contribute to?
Yes. And I think I did it the last time, the Helen Keller Foundation.
Oh,
yes, through the givewell.org. I found them in a book by Peter Singer, The Most Good You Can Do. And the thing with The Most Good You Can Do and the effective altruism movement is they figured out that you can save a life with $5,000. So you want to find a charity that will take the most out of your $5,000. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I give $5,000 every time, but that will do that will do the most with your $5,000. And they say that the one giving, in one case, there's a charity that provides malaria nets, and they feel like they can save the most lives by giving malaria nets with $5,000. You can save one life. And it's a similar thing with Helen Keller Foundation, where they provide vitamin A, which I don't even think about vitamin A, but there are kids and people who suffer from vitamin A deficiency, and it causes blindness and it can cause death. So by providing vitamin A, it's a cheap, effective way to save lives. So I would like to
contribute to that.
To that cause, yeah.
So givewell.org. We search for the charities that save or improve lives the most per dollar. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
We'll contribute to them. We'll link to the show notes and encourage the listeners to contribute as well. Gary Gulman,
please.
I'm thrilled to see your new show.
Oh, man. I would love it if you could come to a night. Yeah, that would be awesome.
I can't wait.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.